It started with a slip, or rather the story of a slip. Margaret, 64, claimed she had fallen in her shower. She called her son David at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, sobbing. She said her ankle was swollen to the size of a grapefruit. She said she was scared to be alone in her big empty house. David, being the dutiful son he was, drove over immediately. He brought her back to the pristine suburban home he shared with his wife, Elena. Just for a few days, David promised Elena, his eyes pleading, "Until the swelling goes down. She just needs ice and elevation." Elena looked at her mother-in-law. Margaret was sitting on their beige sectional sofa, her leg propped up on 3 pillows. She was holding a cup of tea Elena had made her. "I'm such a burden," Margaret sighed, looking at Elena with watery eyes. "I told David not to bring me. I know how much you value your privacy." "It's fine, Margaret," Elena said, forcing a smile. "Stay as long as you need." That was the first mistake. Margaret didn't stay for a few days. She stayed for 3 weeks. And strangely, the ankle never seemed to bruise. She limped dramatically when David was in the room, leaning heavily on his arm, wincing in pain. But twice, when Elena came home early from her marketing job, she saw Margaret walking perfectly normally in the kitchen. As soon as the garage door fully opened, the limp returned. "David," Elena whispered one night in bed, "I think her ankle is fine. I saw her reach for the top shelf today, on her tiptoes." David frowned. "Elena, don't start. She's in pain. Why would she lie? She's lonely. Just be patient." Elena rolled over. She felt the first crack in her marriage. It was a hairline fracture, but it was there. Elena and David didn't have children yet. They had Barnaby. Barnaby was a 3-year-old golden retriever. He was a giant, goofy rug of love. He had never growled in his life. He was house-trained to perfection. In the second week of Margaret's stay, Barnaby changed. Elena came home to find a puddle of urine on the expensive Persian rug in the hallway. "Oh dear," Margaret said, sitting in the armchair. "The dog, he just went. I tried to stop him, but he snapped at me." "Snapped?" Elena asked, dropping her keys. "Barnaby doesn't snap." "He did," Margaret said, clutching her pearls. "He looked vicious. I think he's jealous of the attention David is giving me." David came home and cleaned the rug, scolding Barnaby. The dog cowered in the corner, tail tucked between his legs, shaking. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, David's favorite leather loafers were chewed to shreds. "I caught him doing it," Margaret told David. "I tried to take the shoe away, and he growled. David, that dog is becoming dangerous. What if you have a baby? You can't have an aggressive animal around a baby." David looked at the shredded shoe. He looked at Barnaby, who was hiding under the dining table. "He's never done this," David muttered. "Animals change," Margaret said softly, placing a hand on David's shoulder. "Maybe it's time to think about rehoming him, for safety." Elena stepped in. "Absolutely not. We are not getting rid of our dog because of a few accidents. I'll take him to the vet. Maybe he has a bladder infection." The vet found nothing. Barnaby was physically healthy. "He seems stressed," the vet told Elena. "Is there a new person in the home? Someone he's afraid of?" Elena drove home in silence. She looked at Barnaby in the rearview mirror. He looked sad. "He's afraid," Elena realized. "He's not jealous. He's terrified." The war escalated from the dog to Elena's possessions. Elena had a vase. It wasn't expensive, but it was sentimental. It was hand-blown glass, a gift from her late grandmother. It sat on the mantelpiece, high up, out of reach. One Thursday, Elena walked in the door to the sound of shattering glass. She ran to the living room. The vase was in 1,000 pieces on the hearth. Margaret was standing there, holding a feather duster. "Oh, Elena," Margaret cried. "I am so clumsy. I was just trying to dust. I know you've been so busy with work. The house has gotten a bit dusty. I wanted to help, and I barely touched it." Elena stared at the shards. Her grandmother's vase. Gone. "It was heavy," Elena said, her voice shaking. "You can't knock it over with a feather duster. You have to push it." "Are you calling me a liar?" Margaret's lip quivered. David walked in at that exact moment. "What happened?" "I broke the vase," Margaret sobbed, collapsing into David's arms. "I was trying to clean for her, and she's yelling at me. I'm just an old woman trying to be useful." David looked at Elena. His eyes were cold. "Elena, stop it," David snapped. "It was an accident. It's just a vase. Mom is crying. Apologize." "I will not," Elena said. "She did it on purpose." "On purpose?" David laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "You sound paranoid. Why would my mother break a vase on purpose? She loves you. She cooks dinner. She folds the laundry. You're projecting your stress onto her." "She is gaslighting you, David. Can't you see it?" "The only person acting crazy here is you," David said. "I'm taking Mom out to dinner. You stay here and cool off." They left. Elena stood alone in the silent house. She looked at the broken glass. She wasn't crazy. She knew she wasn't, but she needed proof. David was a man of logic. He needed to see to believe. Elena went to her computer. She opened Amazon. She typed, "Hidden camera 4K Wi-Fi." She typed, "Nanny cam smoke detector." She typed, "Nanny cam digital clock." She selected overnight delivery. Friday morning, David went to work. Margaret went to her weekly bridge club meeting. Her ankle was miraculously fine for cards. Elena called in sick to work. She spent 4 hours turning her home into a fortress of surveillance. She installed a camera disguised as a smoke detector in the living room. She placed a digital clock camera on the kitchen counter. She hid a tiny camera in the bookshelf, nestled between 2 Stephen King novels. She put one in the hallway, pointed directly at the dog's bed. She connected them all to a cloud server. She downloaded the app on her phone. She password-protected everything. "Okay, Margaret," Elena whispered, looking at the live feed on her phone. "Showtime." For the first 2 days, nothing happened. Margaret just watched TV and drank tea. Then came Monday. Elena was at her office. She had her phone propped up on her desk, the sound off, streaming the living room feed. At 10:30 a.m., Margaret stood up from the sofa. She looked around. She checked the windows to make sure no cars were in the driveway. She walked over to Barnaby, who was sleeping peacefully on his bed. Elena watched, holding her breath. Margaret nudged the dog with her foot. Hard. Barnaby woke up. Then, Margaret did something that made Elena's blood freeze. She picked up a heavy magazine and whacked the dog on the nose. Barnaby yelped and scrambled backward. "Bad dog," Margaret hissed. The audio picked it up clearly. "Filthy beast." She walked to the kitchen. She opened the fridge. She took out the leftover lasagna, David's favorite, which Elena had made the night before. Margaret took the lasagna to the trash can. She scraped it all in. Then she took the empty dish and put it in the sink. She pulled out her phone and called David. Elena switched the audio feed to hear clearly. "David?" Margaret's voice changed instantly. It became weak, shaky. "David, I'm so sorry to bother you at work, but I think Elena threw out the lasagna." Elena gasped. "I went to warm it up for lunch," Margaret lied effortlessly. "And it's gone. The dish is in the sink. I think she did it so I wouldn't have anything to eat. She's been so hostile lately. Elena watched David's reaction on the other end of the line, in her imagination, but she heard Margaret's triumphant pause. "It's okay, Mom," Margaret said, pretending to soothe him. "I'll just have toast. Don't fight with her. I don't want to cause trouble." She hung up. Then she smirked. A full, ugly, satisfied smirk directly at the kitchen counter, right into the lens of the hidden clock camera. Elena slammed her hand on her desk. She had it. She had the smoking gun. But she didn't call David, not yet. One video wasn't enough. David would make excuses. Maybe the lasagna was bad. Maybe she was confused. Elena needed a compilation. She needed a movie. Over the next 3 days, the cameras captured a masterclass in psychological warfare. Camera 2, hallway. Margaret taking Elena's favorite silk blouse from the laundry pile, snagging it with a pair of scissors, and then putting it back. Camera 1, living room. Margaret taking a glass of water and deliberately pouring it onto the surge protector behind the TV, then drying the carpet so it looked like an electrical failure. Camera 3, kitchen. Margaret pinching Barnaby's ear until he whined, then yelling, "Help! He bit me!" to an empty room, practicing for the real performance. By Thursday, Elena had 45 minutes of footage. Thursday night was the monthly family dinner. David's sister, Sarah, was coming. Sarah was neutral territory. She thought Margaret was difficult, but not evil. This was the perfect audience. Elena texted David, "Let's have a nice dinner tonight. I made a roast. Let's start over." David replied, "Thank you. That's all I want."
The roast chicken was perfect. The wine was poured. Margaret was in fine form. She sat at the head of the table, a spot she had usurped from Eleanor. "The chicken is a little dry," Margaret said, taking a bite. "But it's edible, dear. You try so hard." "Thanks, Margaret," Eleanor said, smiling. She took a sip of wine. "So," Sarah said, trying to make conversation. "How is the ankle, Mom?" "Oh, it throbs at night," Margaret sighed. "I don't know when I'll be able to go home. David says I can stay as long as I need." David nodded. "Of course, Mom." "Actually," Elena said, setting her fork down, "we need to talk about that." The room went quiet. "Here we go," David groaned. "Elena, please, not tonight." "Yes, tonight," Elena said, "because I found something interesting. We've been having so many accidents lately. The rug, the vase, the TV shorting out, the lasagna disappearing." "Elena," Margaret said, her voice trembling, "why are you bringing this up?" "Because," Elena said, standing up, "I wanted to understand why our luck was so bad, so I installed a security system." Margaret froze. Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth. "What?" David asked. "I put cameras in the house, David." "You did what?" David stood up, angry. "You spied on my mother. That is a violation of privacy. That is paranoid and sick." "Is it?" Elena picked up the remote control for the large smart TV mounted on the dining room wall. "Sarah, you might want to watch this." "Elena, put the remote down," David shouted. "Mom, I'm so sorry, we're leaving." "Sit down, David," Elena yelled. It was the first time she had ever raised her voice at him. It stopped him in his tracks. "You owe me 5 minutes. Watch the screen." She pressed play. The 65-inch 4K screen flickered to life. Scene 1, the limp. The video showed Margaret walking into the living room. She was walking briskly, doing a little dance move. She kicked her leg up high. Then she heard the garage door open. Instantly, she hunched over. She grabbed the wall. She started dragging her left foot. David watched, mouth open. She was dancing? Scene 2. The dog. The video cut to the living room. Barnaby was sleeping. Margaret walked over and kicked him. Thud. Barnaby yelped. "You filth," Margaret hissed on screen. Then she took David's loafer, which she had hidden in her purse, and threw it at the dog. She rubbed the shoe on the dog's teeth to make it look like he chewed it. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. She looked at Margaret. Margaret was pale, gripping the tablecloth. Scene 3. The plant poison. Margaret was in the kitchen. She had a bottle of bleach. She was pouring a capful of bleach into Elena's favorite ficus tree. "Die, you ugly thing," on-screen Margaret muttered. Scene 4. The phone call. This was the finale, the lasagna incident. David watched his mother scrape his favorite meal into the trash, then immediately call him and lie about Elena starving her. He heard his own voice on the recording through the phone. "It's okay, Mom. I'll talk to her." He watched his mother hang up and smirk at the camera. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the dining room was heavier than lead. Barnaby, sensing the tension, walked out from under the table and rested his head on Eleanor's lap. David turned to look at his mother. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a 10-year coma. The fog was gone. "You kicked my dog," David whispered. "David," Margaret stammered. It's deep fakes. It's AI. You know how technology is these days. She doctored it." "Mom, stop," Sarah said, disgusted. "You poured bleach in the plant. I saw the bottle in your hand." I was confused," Margaret cried, tears flowing instantly. "My medication. It makes me do things. I don't remember any of this. David, I'm your mother. She spied on me. She's the villain." David stood up. He walked over to Margaret. Elena braced herself. Would he defend her? Would he say she was sick? David pulled Margaret's chair back. "Get up," he said. "David, get up. Pack your bags." "David, my ankle." "Your ankle is fine," David roared. It was a terrifying sound. "I saw you dancing. You kicked my dog with your bad ankle. Get up." Margaret stood up, trembling. She looked at Eleanor with pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask was fully off. "You ruined everything," Margaret spat at Elena. "You stole him from me." "I didn't steal him," Elena said calmly, stroking Barnaby's head. "You just lost him." "Sarah," David said. "Drive her home. Tonight." "I'm on it," Sarah said. She grabbed Margaret's arm. "Come on, Mum. The show's over." Margaret was dragged out, screaming and crying, playing the victim until the front door slammed shut. David didn't sit back down. He stood in the middle of the room staring at the blank TV screen. He started to cry. Silent, shaking sobs. Eleanor stayed seated. She didn't rush to comfort him. He needed to feel this. Finally, David turned to her. He fell to his knees beside her chair. He buried his face in her lap, right next to the dog he had almost rehomed. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. I chose her over you. I'm so stupid." Elena put her hand on his hair. "You were conditioned," Elena said softly. "She trained you for 30 years to believe her. It's hard to break that programming." "How can you ever forgive me?" "Because you did the right thing in the end," Elena said. "You told her to leave." The locks were changed the next day. David went to therapy. It wasn't easy. He had to unpack decades of guilt and manipulation. Margaret tried to call. David blocked her number. She sent letters. David burned them unopened. She tried to show up at the door 3 weeks later, claiming a heart attack. David spoke to her through the Ring doorbell camera. The irony was not lost on them. "If you are having a heart attack, Mom, I'm calling 911, but I am not opening this door. If you stay, I'm calling the police for trespassing." Margaret miraculously recovered and walked away. 6 months later. Eleanor and David were sitting on the couch. Barnaby was sleeping between them, snoring softly. The house was peaceful. The plants were green. The rugs were clean. "You know," David said, looking at the smoke detector on the ceiling. "We should probably take those cameras down." Eleanor smiled. She picked up her wineglass. "Let's keep them," she said. "Just in case." "In case of what?" "In case we need a reminder," Eleanor said. "That seeing is believing."